He thought he had killed the camera. At exactly 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, 2026, a masked figure appeared at Nancy Guthrie's front door and immediately focused on the Ring doorbell camera mounted beside the entrance. The suspect knew the camera was there. The suspect understood it was recording. And the suspect took deliberate action to disable it, first attempting to knock it down by tapping it gently, as if testing whether it would dislodge from its mounting, then covering the lens with plant foliage from landscaping near the door when the tapping method failed. Mission accomplished from the suspect's perspective. Camera disabled, no footage, no evidence. No visual record of what happened next during the 41 minutes between that moment and 2:28 a.m. when Nancy's pacemaker application disconnected from her phone, indicating she was removed from the house or moved far enough from her phone that the connection was broken. Except the suspect was catastrophically wrong about the camera being killed. The FBI recovered every second of footage from that camera, every frame that the suspect thought was destroyed when the camera was covered and disabled. 44 seconds of crystal-clear video showing the masked suspect's approach to Nancy's front door, showing the deliberate, methodical attempt to disable surveillance, showing equipment including a distinctive backpack and a weapon positioned awkwardly, showing physical characteristics including height and build and body proportions, showing behavioral patterns including how the suspect moved, and problem-solved and adapted when the first method of disabling the camera did not work. All captured in detail that investigators are now using to identify who took Nancy Guthrie from her home that night. The suspect's attempt to avoid being recorded failed completely and utterly, and that failure created one of the most important pieces of evidence in this entire investigation. Evidence that connects to 8 months of Google searches and reconnaissance visits and equipment purchases to form a comprehensive picture of planning and execution. How did the FBI recover footage from a camera that was disabled by being covered? How did they extract video from a device that Nancy did not have cloud storage subscription for, according to reporting about the technical process involved? How did 44 seconds of footage that should not exist, according to what the suspect understood about how these surveillance systems work, end up being released to the public on February 12th, showing the masked figure in sufficient detail that physical characteristics and equipment could be identified? The answer involves digital forensics capabilities that most criminals do not understand. Involves cooperation between federal law enforcement and Google, which manufactures Ring doorbell devices. Involves technical methods for recovering data from local storage buffers even when normal user interfaces would not provide access to that data, and involves the fundamental reality that deleting or disabling or covering something does not always mean the data is truly gone if investigators have the expertise and resources to recover it. If you want to understand in comprehensive detail how the FBI recovered footage from Nancy's doorbell camera, despite her not having cloud storage subscription, and despite the suspect covering the camera at 1:47 a.m., believing that would prevent any recording from being useful, what those 44 seconds of recovered footage actually show frame by frame and what specific details investigators can extract from those images, even though the suspect's face is masked. Why the suspect's immediate focus on disabling the camera rather than approaching the door tells us this was someone who had studied the property in advance and knew exactly where cameras were positioned and how security was configured. What the equipment visible in the footage, including the Ozark Trail hiker pack backpack and the awkwardly positioned weapon, reveals about planning and preparation, and possibly about the suspect's familiarity or lack of familiarity with proper equipment use. How the method chosen for covering the camera using plant foliage demonstrates knowledge that could only come from prior observation during daylight when plants and their relationship to the camera would be visible. How this recovered 44 seconds of footage connects to the 8 months of Google searches starting in June 2025, and to the reconnaissance visits and to all the other evidence showing this crime was meticulously planned rather than impulsively committed, and why this single piece of video evidence might be what ultimately leads to identifying and convicting whoever took Nancy, even though the suspect's face is masked and even though the suspect thought the camera was successfully disabled. Then subscribe to True Crime Vault right now. This channel provides detailed technical breakdowns of how investigations actually work in the real world, how evidence gets recovered through methods and capabilities that most people do not know exist, and how cases get solved not through single pieces of evidence but through the systematic combination of technology and traditional detective work and forensic science. Hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications, because this case continues to develop with new evidence and new analysis, and when the person visible in this footage gets identified through convergence of DNA forensic genealogy and digital trail analysis and camera footage correlation across multiple sources, you want to understand exactly how that identification happened and what evidence made it possible. Hit the like button as well, because comprehensive technical analysis that explains how things actually work, rather than just reporting what happened, deserves to reach everyone following this case and everyone interested in understanding modern investigative techniques. And comment below with your thoughts on whether the FBI can identify the suspect from this 44 seconds of footage, despite the face being masked, and despite the suspect's belief that covering the camera eliminated the evidence. Now let us examine in comprehensive detail exactly what happened at Nancy's front door at 1:47 a.m., how the footage was recovered through technical methods, what it shows when analyzed frame by frame, and why the suspect's belief that the camera was disabled was catastrophically and irreversibly wrong. February 1st, 2026, at precisely 1:47 a.m. according to the timestamp on the recovered footage. Nancy Guthrie had been home for approximately 4 hours and 57 minutes since her son-in-law Tommaso Cioni dropped her off at her residence at 9:48 p.m. on January 31st. Her garage door had closed automatically at 9:50 p.m. as captured by her garage door opener's logs. The house had been quiet during those nearly 5 hours. The neighborhood surrounding her home in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson had been quiet, as residential neighborhoods typically are in the hours after midnight. And then, at 1:47 in the morning, motion was detected by Nancy's Ring doorbell camera, and the device automatically began recording as a figure approached the front entrance. Ring doorbell cameras and similar smart home security devices are motion activated by design. When their sensors detect movement in their programmed field of view, typically an area extending several feet from the door and covering the approach path that visitors would use, they automatically begin recording video and simultaneously send alerts to the owner's smartphone through the Ring application. Nancy would have received an alert on her phone notifying her that motion was detected at her front door at 1:47 a.m. But at that hour, she was presumably asleep in her bedroom and may not have noticed the alert immediately, or at all if her phone was in another room or if notifications were silenced during sleeping hours. The camera recorded regardless of whether Nancy looked at the alert or acknowledged it, because that is exactly how these systems are designed to function. Motion triggers recording automatically without requiring any action from the homeowner. The figure that appeared in the camera's field of view at 1:47 a.m. was masked. The face was covered, preventing immediate visual identification through facial recognition. But the camera captured the approach with clarity and captured what happened next, with sufficient detail that FBI video specialists analyzing the footage frame by frame could extract crucial information about physical characteristics, equipment, behavior patterns, and knowledge that the suspect demonstrated. The suspect did not immediately approach the door as if to knock or ring the doorbell as a normal visitor would. The suspect did not call out or announce presence. The suspect did not behave in any way that would be consistent with legitimate reason to be at someone's front door at 1:47 in the morning. Instead, the very first action upon coming into the camera's view was directed at the camera itself, rather than at the door, or at attempting to gain entry to the house. The suspect reached toward the Ring doorbell camera with what appears in the footage to be a gloved hand and tapped the device. Not a hard strike attempting to break it, not a violent smash, but a firm, deliberate tap as if testing whether the camera was securely mounted or whether it would come loose or fall from its position with moderate force applied. The tapping appears in the recovered footage as methodical testing, as someone evaluating whether this method would work to dislodge the camera and render it inoperable. When the tapping method did not successfully dislodge the camera from its mounting, when the device remained firmly attached to the wall beside the door, the suspect adapted immediately to a different approach. The suspect reached toward landscaping positioned near the front entrance and pulled plant foliage, leaves, and small branches from bushes or plants that were growing in that area, and used that vegetation to cover the camera lens. The foliage was positioned deliberately in front of the lens, blocking the camera's view of what was happening. From the suspect's perspective, standing at Nancy's door at 1:47 a.m., this would have successfully disabled recording because the camera could no longer see anything beyond the leaves covering the lens. Mission accomplished. Surveillance defeated. Evidence prevented. Time to proceed with whatever came next, with entering the house and taking Nancy. But what the suspect did not understand, what the suspect fundamentally misunderstood about how Ring cameras and similar devices work, what proved to be a catastrophic gap in the suspect's knowledge, is that covering the lens does not delete the footage that has already been recorded in the time between when motion was first detected and when the lens was covered. The camera had been recording from the moment motion triggered it. By the time the suspect succeeded in covering the lens with plant foliage, 44 seconds of footage had already been captured, showing the entire approach, showing the masked figure clearly, showing the deliberate attempt to disable the camera through first tapping and then covering, showing equipment that the suspect was carrying, including a backpack and a weapon, showing physical characteristics including height and build, showing behavioral patterns including how the suspect moved and adapted when the first method failed. Those 44 seconds were stored in the camera's local memory buffer the moment they were recorded. Ring doorbells and similar smart security cameras have onboard storage, internal memory chips that temporarily hold recorded footage. If the device has an active cloud storage subscription service purchased by the homeowner, footage automatically uploads in real-time or near real-time to Ring's cloud servers operated by Amazon, where it is stored remotely and can be accessed at any time through the Ring application on the owner's smartphone or through a web browser. Cloud storage provides backup and provides access even if the physical camera is destroyed or stolen. But if there is no active cloud subscription, if the homeowner has not purchased that additional service which costs a monthly or annual fee, footage remains in local storage on the device itself temporarily, before eventually being overwritten by new recordings as the limited storage space fills up. Ring cameras without cloud subscription typically retain footage in local storage for a period of hours, or potentially days, depending on how much activity triggers recording, but that footage is not automatically accessible through the Ring app in the same way cloud-stored footage would be. Nancy Guthrie did not have an active cloud storage subscription for her Ring doorbell, according to reporting about how the FBI obtained this footage and according to statements about the technical process involved in recovery. Without cloud subscription, footage recorded by the camera at 1:47 a.m. would normally remain in local storage on the device for a limited time, possibly several hours or a day, and would eventually be overwritten as new motion events triggered new recordings that filled the available storage space. Under normal circumstances with no intervention, that 44 seconds of footage might have been lost permanently within hours or days as the storage buffer cycled and old recordings were replaced by new ones. But these were not normal circumstances. This was not a normal case. This was a major federal investigation into the suspected abduction of an 84-year-old woman, the mother of Savannah Guthrie, who is one of America's most recognizable television journalists and co-anchor of the Today Show, which is watched by millions every morning. This was a case that immediately drew FBI involvement, that received massive media coverage, that had substantial resources devoted to it from the beginning. And the FBI had technical capabilities and access to expertise that the suspect who covered the camera at 1:47 a.m. apparently did not anticipate or understand. The FBI, working in cooperation with engineers from Google, the parent company that owns Ring and manufactures the doorbell camera devices, was able to access the local storage buffer in Nancy's specific doorbell camera unit and extract the footage that had been recorded during those 44 seconds before the lens was covered. How they accomplished this technically at the engineering level is not fully disclosed in public reporting because revealing detailed forensic methods could help future criminals develop countermeasures or could compromise the effectiveness of those techniques in future investigations. Law enforcement typically protects technical capabilities by not explaining them in complete detail publicly. But we know from reporting about this case that the recovery involved digital forensic techniques that can extract data from device storage even when that data is not accessible through normal user interfaces like the Ring smartphone application. Think of it conceptually, like recovering deleted files from a computer hard drive, a process that many people are familiar with, at least in general terms. When you delete a file on a computer, when you move something to the recycle bin and then empty the bin, the file is not immediately and completely erased from the physical hard drive. Instead, the operating system marks the space that file occupied as available for reuse by future data. But until something else actually overwrites that specific space on the drive, the deleted file's data remains physically present on the magnetic platters or flash memory chips that comprise the drive's storage. Digital forensic specialists use specialized software tools to scan storage devices at a level below the operating system, reading the raw data on the drive and reconstructing files that the operating system reports as deleted, but that remain physically present. This technique is used routinely in criminal investigations to recover deleted evidence from suspects' computers and phones and storage devices. Suspects delete incriminating files thinking that makes them gone, but forensic recovery often brings them back. Similar principles and similar technical capabilities apply to recovering footage from cameras and other devices with onboard storage. The Ring doorbell's internal storage, the memory chips that hold recorded video, contains data that may not be accessible through the normal Ring application interface if there is no cloud subscription or if the footage has been marked as overwritten. But forensic access to the device itself, achieved either by physically removing the storage chips and reading them directly using specialized equipment, or by accessing the device through engineering-level interfaces and communication protocols that bypass the normal consumer-facing software, can extract data that remains in storage at the physical level. The FBI, with full cooperation from Google, was able to extract those 44 seconds of footage from Nancy's doorbell camera. That footage, once recovered, was provided to FBI video specialists, analysts who are trained in examining video frame by frame and extracting maximum information from visual evidence. Those specialists enhance the footage using video processing techniques that can improve clarity, can adjust contrast and brightness to bring out details that are not immediately visible in raw footage, can stabilize shaky video, can zoom into specific areas while minimizing pixelation. And on February 12, 2026, 11 days after Nancy disappeared, and 11 days after the suspect covered the camera thinking footage was prevented, the FBI released that recovered and enhanced footage to the public. The release was accompanied by a request for help identifying the suspect shown in the video. The FBI provided the footage to media outlets and posted it through official channels, asking anyone who might recognize the individual based on physical characteristics or equipment or behavioral patterns visible in the video to contact them immediately. The release of this footage on February 12th was a watershed moment in the public understanding of this investigation because it provided the first visual evidence of the suspect. Up until that point, the public knew that Nancy had disappeared from her home under circumstances that investigators believed involved abduction. But there was no image of who might be responsible, no visual representation of the person or persons involved. The February 12th release changed that by showing a masked figure at Nancy's door at 1:47 a.m., engaged in behavior that clearly indicated criminal intent in the form of disabling surveillance before proceeding. Subscribe to True Crime Vault if you have not already done so. Make absolutely certain that notifications are turned on so you are immediately alerted when we post new coverage. Like this video so the algorithm shows it to more people who are following this case. Visit our channel to watch all our comprehensive previous coverage analyzing every aspect of Nancy's disappearance. And comment below with your analysis of whether investigators can identify the suspect from this footage despite the masking. Now let me describe in comprehensive detail what those 44 seconds of recovered footage show when analyzed frame by frame and what information investigators can extract from those images. The footage shows a figure approaching Nancy's front door at 1:47 a.m. The approach is captured from the moment the person comes into the camera's field of view, allowing analysts to observe gait and movement patterns from the beginning. The person is wearing a mask that covers the face, preventing direct facial recognition through comparison against photo databases or through artificial intelligence facial recognition systems. But masking the face, while it prevents the most obvious form of identification, does not eliminate all identifying information that can be extracted from video footage. FBI video specialists analyzing footage frame by frame using specialized software and training can extract numerous details that help build a comprehensive profile of the suspect, even without being able to see the face clearly. Height can be estimated with reasonable accuracy by comparing the suspect's position and size relative to fixed objects in the frame, whose dimensions are known or can be determined. Door frames have relatively standard heights that vary within a narrow range based on building codes. Most residential door frames in the United States are between 80 and 82 inches tall. Steps leading to doors have standard rises determined by building codes, typically between 6 and 8 inches per step. By measuring how the suspect's height relates to these reference points visible in the footage, by comparing where the top of the suspect's head aligns relative to the door frame or relative to other fixed architectural features, analysts can estimate height. The FBI released information on February 12th when they made the footage public, stating that the suspect appears to be between 5'9" and 5'10" inches tall. That height estimate, with a range of only 1 inch, represents fairly precise analysis. It came from careful measurement of the suspect's height relative to Nancy's door and door frame and other architectural features captured in the camera's view. That 1 inch range means the FBI is confident the suspect is not significantly taller than 5'10" or significantly shorter than 5'9". That narrows the population significantly. Average male height in the United States is approximately 5'9", so this suspect is average to slightly above average height, eliminating anyone who is particularly short or particularly tall. Build and body proportions are clearly visible in the footage despite the face being masked. The suspect in the recovered video appears to have medium build, not obviously overweight or heavily muscled, not unusually thin or frail. Medium build describes the majority of the population, but it does eliminate extremes. Someone who is substantially overweight would show different body proportions. Someone who is very thin would appear different. Medium build narrows possibilities but does not narrow them as much as some other characteristics might. Body proportions, the relationship between torso length and leg length, between shoulder width and hip width, between limb length and overall height, create patterns that are consistent for individuals, and that can be compared if investigators develop suspects whose proportions can be measured from other photos or videos or from direct observation. If DNA forensic genealogy or digital forensics produces a list of candidate suspects, video of those candidates can be compared against the footage from Nancy's door to see if body proportions match. Significant differences in proportions would be grounds for eliminating candidates from consideration. Gait analysis examines how someone walks and moves, the distinctive patterns in their movement. Every person has a unique gait that results from the specific combination of their skeletal structure, muscle development, injuries or conditions affecting mobility, habits developed over years of walking, and neurological patterns controlling movement. The way someone swings their arms while walking, how they shift weight from foot to foot, whether they lead with heel or toe, how much vertical bounce is in their step, how their hips and shoulders move relative to each other. All of these create a pattern that is consistent for that individual, and that is often unconscious meaning. People cannot easily change their gait deliberately, even if they are trying to disguise themselves. Video specialists trained in gait analysis can identify characteristics in the 44 seconds of footage from Nancy's door that create a gait signature for the suspect. If investigators develop suspects through other means, video of those suspects walking can be compared against the gait signature from February 1st. Matches strengthen the case that a suspect is the same person shown in the footage. Significant differences might eliminate suspects. Gait analysis has been used successfully in other criminal cases to link suspects to video evidence. The clothing and equipment visible in the footage provide crucial specific information. The suspect is wearing what appears to be dark clothing, dark pants and dark jacket or shirt or hoodie, appropriate for activity at night where avoiding visibility would be important. Dark clothing does not reflect light and makes someone harder to see in darkness compared to light-colored clothing. The choice of dark clothing indicates awareness of this principle and desire to minimize visibility to neighbors or to anyone who might be awake and looking out windows at 1:47 a.m. The suspect is carrying an Ozark Trail Hiker Pack backpack, which is clearly visible in the footage, and which is distinctive enough that the specific model can be identified by experts familiar with outdoor equipment. The Ozark Trail brand is exclusive to Walmart, sold only through that retailer. The specific hiker pack model has design characteristics including shape, strap configuration, exterior pocket placement, and overall proportions that distinguish it from other backpack models. FBI analysts or experts they consulted were able to identify from the footage that this is an Ozark Trail hiker pack rather than some other brand or model. That identification is investigatively valuable because it creates a traceable purchase path. Every Ozark Trail hiker pack purchased from Walmart stores in the Tucson area or in surrounding areas in the months before February 1st can potentially be traced through transaction records. Credit card and debit card purchases provide names directly through payment information. Cash purchases can be traced through security camera footage from Walmart stores showing who was at the register at the time of the transaction, and through license plate captures from parking lot cameras showing what vehicle that person arrived in. The weapon visible in the footage holstered on the suspect's body provides another identifying characteristic. FBI Director Kash Patel, in public statements about this case, described the weapon positioning as being over the groin area, which is an unusual and non-standard location for carrying a firearm. Proper firearm carry typically involves holsters positioned on the hip or on the chest or on the ankle, or concealed inside waistband, locations that provide quick access while maintaining safety and comfort. Positioning a weapon over the groin area is awkward, potentially unsafe, and not consistent with trained firearm handling. That unusual positioning might indicate several things. It might indicate someone who is unfamiliar with firearms and with proper carry methods. It might indicate someone who positioned the weapon for what they thought would be quick access without understanding standard carry positions. It might indicate someone who positioned the weapon to be concealed under clothing in a way they thought was effective. Whatever the reason, the unusual position is a distinctive characteristic that might be remembered by people who know the suspect, or might be visible in other footage if the suspect has been captured on cameras elsewhere. On February 12th, when the FBI released the enhanced footage and analysis, they provided an additional crucial physical detail. The suspect has a black mustache that is visible in the footage despite the face being masked. That means either the mask did not cover the entire face from nose down, or facial hair was visible around the edges or borders of whatever mask was being worn. A black mustache is a specific physical characteristic that significantly narrows the suspect pool. It eliminates anyone who does not have facial hair. It eliminates anyone whose facial hair is a different color, such as blonde or red or gray or white. It limits possibilities to people who have dark facial hair, and specifically to people who have a mustache rather than a full beard or goatee. Mustaches are not as common as they were in previous decades. Many men are clean-shaven. Many men who have facial hair have full beards rather than just mustaches. Someone with a black mustache visible despite masking is a specific enough characteristic that witnesses who saw someone matching other elements of the description might remember the facial hair. Neighbors who saw someone in the area, co-workers of a suspect, people who know the suspect socially, might remember a black mustache combined with other descriptive elements. The behavioral patterns visible in the 44 seconds of footage tell investigators important things about the suspect's mindset, preparation, and knowledge. The immediate focus on the camera rather than on approaching the door or attempting entry shows the suspect knew the camera was there and knew it needed to be disabled before proceeding. That knowledge did not come from random chance or from noticing the camera upon arrival. Ring doorbells are relatively small devices, and in darkness at 1:47 a.m. would not necessarily be immediately obvious to someone approaching for the first time. But this suspect went directly to the camera without searching for it, without looking around to locate it. Direct approach indicates prior knowledge of its exact position. That prior knowledge indicates observation of the property under conditions when the camera would be visible, likely during daylight. Someone who had been to Nancy's property before, someone who had studied the front entrance, would know where the doorbell camera was mounted. The 8 months of Google searches and the image searches and the reported reconnaissance visits all support the conclusion that prior observation occurred. The immediate focus on the camera in the footage confirms that conclusion behaviorally. The method chosen for disabling the camera tells investigators more. The suspect first tried tapping the device to see if it would dislodge. When that failed, the suspect adapted immediately to a different method, covering the lens with plant foliage. That adaptation shows problem-solving ability and shows the suspect had observed the plants near the door and had assessed that they could be used for covering the camera. You cannot know which plants are positioned close enough to a camera to be pulled over the lens unless you have seen the camera and the plants together and have mentally noted their relationship. At 1:47 a.m. in full darkness, identifying which plants are near the camera and are suitable for covering would be difficult or impossible without prior knowledge. But the suspect reached for the plants without apparent hesitation, without searching. grabbed foliage and positioned it over the lens efficiently. That confidence and efficiency indicates prior planning, indicates having observed the plants during daylight when they were visible, indicates having thought through this method in advance as a way to disable the camera if tapping did not work. All of that behavioral analysis from 44 seconds of footage combines with the physical characteristics and the equipment to create a comprehensive profile. Height 5'9" to 5'10", medium build, black mustache, dark clothing, Ozark trail hiker, packed backpack, weapon positioned awkwardly, knowledge of camera location from prior observation, problem solving and adaptation when first method failed, confidence in using plants to cover camera indicating prior planning. That profile guides the investigation by providing specific things to look for when evaluating potential suspects developed through other evidence. When DNA forensic genealogy produces candidate lists of people who might be the source of DNA from the glove or from other evidence collected at the scene, those candidates can be filtered by the profile from the footage. Anyone who does not match height range gets eliminated. Anyone without dark facial hair gets eliminated. Anyone whose body proportions are significantly different gets eliminated. Anyone who does not own or did not purchase an Ozark Trail backpack gets investigated to determine if they had access to one through other means. True Crime Vault provides comprehensive ongoing coverage of major investigations. Subscribe now so you never miss analysis. Turn on all notifications. Like this video to support detailed technical content. Visit our channel for all previous coverage. Comment below with your thoughts on the footage. And if you have information, contact the FBI immediately at 1-800-CALL-FBI or Pima County Sheriff at 520-351-4900. Now let me explain why the suspect's belief that covering the camera would prevent footage from being useful was wrong in multiple fundamental ways beyond just the technical reality that footage was already recorded before the lens was covered. Even if no footage had been recovered from the camera itself through the FBI's technical capabilities, even if the covering of the lens had successfully prevented any video from being preserved, the act of disabling the camera creates evidence in itself and creates investigative leads that would be valuable. Let me explain how. First, the precise timing is evidence regardless of whether footage exists. The camera detected motion and began recording at 1:47 a.m. Even if the footage had been lost, the camera's system logs would show that motion was detected at that timestamp. Modern smart devices create extensive logs of their operation for debugging and for user analytics. Those logs would show the motion detection event even without video. That timestamp tells investigators when the suspect approached the house. Combining that 1:47 a.m. timestamp with the 2:28 a.m. timestamp when Nancy's pacemaker disconnected from her phone gives investigators a 41-minute window during which whatever happened at Nancy's home occurred. That window narrows the time frame that needs to be analyzed in all other forms of evidence. Cell tower records for phones of interest can be examined specifically for that 41-minute window. Did any suspect's phone move during that time? Did any phone appear near Nancy's home during that window? Camera footage from neighbors throughout the area can be examined specifically for that time frame. What vehicles passed cameras between 1:47 and 2:28? Automated license plate readers, if any captured vehicles in the area, can be queried for that specific window. Every form of time-based evidence gets focused by knowing the precise time frame when the crime occurred. Second, the knowledge that the camera existed and needed to be disabled tells investigators important things regardless of whether footage was recovered. Random opportunistic criminals approaching a house looking for easy targets do not necessarily know where cameras are positioned. They might notice a camera upon arriving and might avoid approaching, or might not care because they are acting impulsively without sophisticated planning. But this suspect knew about the camera before arriving, knew exactly where it was, focused on it immediately upon approach, attempted to disable it before proceeding with entering the house. That behavior indicates planning, indicates prior observation, indicates knowledge of the property's security setup. Even without footage showing what the suspect looked like, the fact that the suspect knew about the camera and disabled it would tell investigators this was not random. This was targeted. This was someone who had studied Nancy's home. That narrows the investigation to people who had opportunity to observe the property, people who had reason to target Nancy specifically, people who planned rather than acted impulsively. Third, The specific method used to disable the camera provides evidence about the suspect's knowledge and preparation. Covering the lens with plant foliage indicates the suspect knew which plants were positioned appropriately, which requires observation during conditions when plants are visible. Even without footage of the suspect, finding the camera covered with plant material would tell investigators the suspect had been to the property before, under conditions when the relationship between plants and camera could be assessed. That supports and confirms the evidence from Google searches and from reported reconnaissance visits. Fourth, even if the camera had been completely disabled immediately upon approach with no recording occurring at all, the disabled camera itself would be evidence that someone approached at approximately the time when Nancy disappeared and deliberately tampered with security systems. The mere fact of the camera being tampered with would be significant even without video. It would establish that someone with knowledge and intent disabled surveillance before committing a crime. That fact supports criminal charges and establishes premeditation and planning. The suspect's fundamental misunderstanding, the critical error in thinking that covering one camera means defeating all surveillance, stems from not understanding how modern investigations work. Modern investigations do not rely on single sources of evidence. They combine multiple independent sources. Cameras throughout an area continue operating even if one camera is disabled. The neighbor's Ring camera on Camino Real 2.5 miles away continued recording even though Nancy's camera was covered. That neighbor's camera captured 12 vehicles between midnight and 6 a.m., including what expert analysis identified as possibly a Kia Soul at 2:36 a.m. Other neighbors throughout the Catalina foothills had cameras that continued recording. Some of those cameras might have captured the suspect's vehicle arriving or leaving. Some might have captured the suspect on foot if approach was not by vehicle directly to Nancy's door. Digital forensics continues regardless of whether cameras work. Google search records showing 8 months of searches for Nancy's address exist independently of whether cameras captured anything on February 1st. Those searches were logged by Google's systems. Those logs can be subpoenaed. IP addresses can be traced to subscribers. That digital trail exists whether cameras worked or not. Cell tower records continue regardless of cameras. If the suspect had a phone, that phone communicated with towers throughout the relevant period. Those communications created logs showing which phone was near which tower at which time. Subpoenas to cellular carriers produce those logs. Analysis of those logs shows phone movements. That data exists independently of any camera. DNA evidence exists regardless of cameras. If the suspect shed skin cells or touched surfaces or left biological material anywhere on Nancy's property or on items discarded along an escape route, that DNA can be extracted and analyzed. Forensic genealogy can build family trees and identify candidates. That process proceeds whether cameras captured anything or not. Financial transaction records exist regardless of cameras. The purchase of the Ozark Trail backpack visible in the footage created transaction records at Walmart. Those records exist whether Nancy's camera was disabled or not. Credit card purchases created financial records. Cash purchases created timestamps and security camera footage from Walmart. The backpack purchase is traceable because purchasing creates records that are independent of what happened at Nancy's door. Every form of evidence exists independently. The suspect defeated one camera temporarily, but in doing so created video evidence that was recovered through technical capabilities the suspect did not anticipate. Created behavioral evidence showing planning and knowledge. Created timeline evidence narrowing when events occurred. Created proof that this was not random but was targeted and prepared. Every action the suspect took to avoid evidence actually created multiple forms of evidence that investigators are now using to build toward identification. The suspect at Nancy's door at 1:47 a.m. made a critical and irreversible error. Covered one camera thinking that prevented visual evidence, but the footage was already recorded. The FBI recovered it through methods the suspect did not understand. And that footage now provides a comprehensive profile that connects to all the other evidence, that filters suspect lists generated by DNA and digital forensics, that confirms planning and targeting, that shows equipment and physical characteristics, that captures behavior patterns. 44 seconds that the suspect thought would never be seen are now being analyzed frame by FBI specialists and are being used to identify who took Nancy Guthrie. Nancy has been missing for over 35 days as of the most recent reporting. The 44 seconds of footage recovered from her doorbell camera represents one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire investigation. Not because it shows the suspect's face, because it does not. Not because it captures the crime itself, because it only shows the approach and the camera disabling, but because it provides a comprehensive collection of data points about height, build, facial hair, equipment, knowledge, behavior, timing, all of which connect to other evidence and all of which narrow who the suspect could be. Combined with DNA being analyzed through forensic genealogy to build family trees and identify candidates, combined with digital trails from 8 months of Google searches being traced through IP addresses and internet service provider records, combined with the Ozark Trail backpack being tracked through Walmart purchase records and security footage, combined with cell tower data being analyzed for phones that were near Nancy's home at critical times, combined with camera footage from neighbors throughout the Catalina foothills being reviewed and enhanced and cross-referenced, combined with systematic detective work pursuing every lead and every tip, the evidence is building toward convergence where multiple independent lines all point to the same name. The suspect at Nancy's door at 1:47 a.m. believed that defeating one camera meant avoiding visual evidence completely. That belief was wrong in every way possible. The FBI recovered every frame of footage. Every second of those 44 seconds is being analyzed. Every detail is being cataloged and compared and used to filter suspects. Every characteristic visible in the footage provides a data point that narrows possibilities. And when DNA forensic genealogy and digital forensics and camera analysis and transaction tracking and cell tower data all converge on the same individual, when all those independent investigations arrive at one name through completely different methods, the 44 seconds of footage will be there as visual confirmation that the person identified matches the person who appeared at Nancy's door and disabled the camera and took her from her home. That footage exists because the suspect did not understand that covering a lens does not delete data already recorded. The footage exists because the FBI has technical capabilities to recover data from devices, even without cloud storage. The footage exists because Google cooperated fully with law enforcement providing engineering support. And the footage will be used in court when charges are filed, showing a jury the masked figure at Nancy's door, showing the deliberate disabling of surveillance, showing the equipment and characteristics that match the defendant, providing visual evidence that connects to all the other evidence in a way that creates certainty beyond reasonable doubt. The suspect thought the camera was dead at 1:47 a.m., but the camera captured everything. The FBI recovered everything. And everything captured in those 44 seconds is now evidence that will lead to identification and prosecution and justice. True Crime Vault will continue covering Nancy Guthrie's case until it reaches resolution, until Nancy is found, until whoever took her is identified and arrested and charged and tried. Subscribe to this channel for ongoing detailed technical analysis explaining how investigations actually work. Turn on all notifications so you are immediately alerted to new coverage. Like this video to support comprehensive evidence-based content. Visit our channel to watch all our previous coverage analyzing every aspect of this case, from the doorbell footage, to the DNA evidence, to the Google searches, to the Kia Soul identification, to the Day 35 developments and everything in between. Comment below with your thoughts on whether investigators can identify the suspect from the 44 seconds of footage despite the masking. Can physical characteristics and equipment and behavior patterns provide enough information to narrow to one person when combined with other evidence? Does the black mustache visible despite the mask give investigators enough to filter suspect lists? Will the Ozark Trail backpack purchases lead to the right person? And most importantly, if you have any information about this case, if you recognize anything about the person in that footage, if you know someone who matches the physical description and who had the equipment and who showed unusual interest in Nancy or Savannah, if you have seen someone carrying an Ozark Trail backpack who fits the profile, if you have any knowledge whatsoever that might help, contact the FBI immediately at 1-800-CALL-FBI or contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. $1 million in rewards from the Guthrie family plus additional FBI and Crime Stoppers rewards totaling over $1,200,000 remain available for information leading to finding Nancy or to the arrest and conviction of whoever took her. The person in that footage took an 84-year-old woman from her home in the middle of the night. The person in that footage thought covering a camera meant the evidence was gone forever. But the evidence exists. The FBI has it. Every frame is being used. And it will help provide the answers that Nancy's family deserves and the justice that Nancy deserves. Nancy Guthrie deserves to be found. Her family deserves to know what happened. And the 44 seconds of footage that the suspect thought was destroyed will help make that happen.